Before we get started, I wanted to plug a project that my own dear mummy is doing. She's brand new to the world of vlogging, and she's eager to share with people who are interested. She's just getting started, so bear with her while she gets a hang of how it works and upgrades some of her recording equipment. In her words, Daughters of the Black Madonna is a new approach to an ancient belief. If you love the beauty of church and prayer, but hate the patriarchy and dogma, you may really resonate with this channel. Celebrate all things divine feminine, enjoy learning about the connections between pagan holy days and the more recent feast days of the church, and participate in meditations, feminine rosaries, and prayers for female deities and saints. Check out the first couple videos by searching Daughters of the Black Madonna on YouTube, and be sure to like and subscribe. I will include a direct link to her channel in my show notes. Thanks for your support, everyone, and don't forget that she's my mommy, so be nice. This is an Unspoiled Network podcast. This is Some Spoiled, covering A Song of Ice and Fire, Book 1, Game of Thrones, Chapters 3, 4, and 5. Daenerys. John?
Yes.
Eddard, and then John? I think it's Eddard and then John.
Okay.
In these chapters, Rashawn and I definitely know what happened and what is going on for our very professional show. And we have Eddard getting asked to be the hand of the king, and all we want to do is just run into him and grab him by the lapels, which he definitely has, and yell, "Don't do it, Eddard." But we just have to stand by and watch as he does the thing.
Yep, he does the thing, even with all the foreboding feelings that he has in his stomach.
Won't you listen to the antlers?
Right?
Welcome to Some Spoiled.
Monsters are dangerous, and just now kings are dying like flies.
I am
the king! Fuck the king.
Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha.
I am Rashawn.
Oh, yeah, that was hard to watch. I hated it.
It was hard to listen to. It was. And I have, I am hoping, and I don't really doubt it. I think it will begin to happen without me even realizing it. I believe the further we get into the books, the further away from the show I will be. Mm-hmm. You know, for the early stages, it's I can't help myself but be like, oh, again, I remember this from the show, whatever. But I really do think that as we get into it, that's going to come up less and less for me. And I noticed it happening already a little bit with the Daenerys chapter, which, y'all, he calls her like Daenerys, and Daenerys. And I know we joked about this in the last episode, but I feel like we're going to have to just talk about it every time because it is too much.
Man, I was editing that part where I just like yelled at him and you were cracking up. Yeah, that's a mess.
And then I started like trying to like make excuses for him, and I was like, okay, what he's doing is each character calls her something a little bit differently. So he's adding, you know, nuance and subtext to each character. Girl, I'm so full of shit.
Oh my God.
Because I'm pretty sure her brother calls her two different things at one point.
This is what I'm talking about. Like, yeah. Yep.
But yeah, so her chapter, which is the first one, and then it's, I think we were right. It is Daenerys, Eddard, and then Jon.
Mm-hmm. I think so, yeah.
So
they don't have them listed in the Kindle, like, table of contents, which makes sense because the names being at certain spots are kind of spoilers.
Yeah. I have it, on Audible, and it's on my phone, so I do have a chapter of contents available. So that's the order that it goes in.
Okay.
And I was completely struck by how young she is.
Yeah.
She is 13, y'all.
Mm-hmm.
I was unaware. I knew she was supposed to be young, but I didn't know she was that young.
Mm-hmm.
And it changes everything.
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned, it changes everything. Yeah. Whew.
Yeah, this was one of the things that I think I told you about, how like some people complained when I first started the coverage with Brendan because he was so hung up on stuff. And he was very hung up about how young Daenerys is. And a lot of people were just very eager. And by a lot of people, I mean me also.
Oh, wow.
Because I, at the time, was just kind of like, this is accurate to the period. I don't really,
Sure.
And now I'm like,
yeah.
The period, this isn't real. I get that it's supposed to be based on a period. But this is fantasy, and he could have done whatever he wanted.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he didn't,
absolutely. Yeah. This is his story. He could have made her whatever age he wanted to make her. And in his mind, it was more important to be, air quotes, historically accurate when it comes to her being 13, but has no problems being inaccurate when you start talking about dragons.
Right.
So this was weird to read because, my experience with the show, I don't have those nagging issues with the plot, She is not presented as, she's presented on the show as being young, but I don't think we're supposed to believe she's that young. So watching this chapter with the brother Viserys.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, y'all, I forgot how much I can't stand this motherfucker.
Yeah, he sucks.
And this voice that what's his name? Dotrice. I keep calling him Dotrice, and that is the name of someone from something else. So I will work on that. The voice he uses for him is bananas.
Oh my god, he is.
It's like super high pitched. He sounds like an old woman.
Yeah, he does.
Which, considering how much I dislike this character, I am okay with.
He's got a very nasal quality to him. You're right.
Yeah, he sounds like someone doing a really bad imitation of an old hag that lives in the woods by herself who may or may not be a witch.
She is.
Right? This is the fucking witch man, Hansel and Gretel. But he is the worst, and you don't want to wake the dragon. Motherfucker, if you don't get out my face with this bullshit.
I had forgotten how hip Daenerys is to his bullshit already.
Yeah, right away.
She's looking at Illyrio, and the fact that Illyrio's clearly laughing up his sleeve at this dude. I had just kind of forgotten that she can see. This isn't what this kid thinks. He's just so blinded by his grief and entitlement.
Yep. And his righteousness, and his thirst for vengeance. And there's a quick passage where they're all kind of chilling, and Daenerys notes that underneath Illyrio's fine silks and his perfume, that he stinks.
Yeah.
And I was like, yep. But yeah, I was also, to talk a little bit about the show, I don't know if the show captured how hip she is.
No.
From what I recall, she's very much sort of just naive and is just a pawn that's being played. And in these chapters, like, you're listening to her and you're like, oh, she fucking peeps what's happening.
Yeah.
She doesn't have any agency. She's got no control. She can't make anything be anything other than what it's going to be. Mm-hmm. But she's not slow. She sees what's happening here. And the whole chapter is really just Viserys. Oh, you guys, when he's talking about how she has to... oh my God, I'm all over the place. But there's a moment where she talks about how she knows that in the streets they call her brother the Beggar King. Mm-hmm. And she's glad that she doesn't know what they call her.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh, wow. Like, that is some fucking grown-up fucking observational skills. And, and understanding of what your position really... Because her brother is living in this fucking fantasy world, and she can't join him there. I love the bits when she's talking about how when her brother starts to drone on, about their glorious past, how none of that really means anything to her.
Yeah.
She wasn't even born yet. She was born on the run. She doesn't know anything about the great halls and the throne and her father being the king or being the mad king or any of that. Mm-hmm. So she is grounded firmly in what is the reality of their existence.
Yeah, definitely.
Meanwhile, her brother is like a fucking kite, barely tethered to reality, just like beeping and bopping through the wind.
Indeed.
So when he is looking and talking to her about, there's a moment where he's just like, you're still slouching. And he like fixes her posture and then grabs her breasts and then like twists her nipple to, it feels like it's very much a threat, I think.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And there's a whole sequence of her being prepared to meet the cow. And, how she is being told by this handmaiden, what a great honor it all is going to be, And she's heard from her brother and she's heard from Illyrio about, how powerful the cow is. There's that whole bit about how long his braid is because he's never lost a battle.
Yeah.
And there is absolutely zero interest in how she feels about any of this. Mm-hmm. What her say in it is, it's so clear that she does not get a say. She is just a thing they are draping in fine silks to like pawn off to this man for this army. And it is so much sadder than what I experienced watching it on television.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This is the thing that I think will probably continue to strike you as we read, is that the show can get plot points right without really getting it. It will, they'll nail what happens in its way, but it just, and some of that is, of course, a book is a different medium, yada, yada, yada. But that's not all it is, I don't think. And just there'll be some things that I'm really interested to discuss that are coming up pretty soon.
Okay.
And I just think it's interesting. There are some things that they changed that I defend because I understand what it was they were trying to do instead. And then there are some things that I'm just like, why defend? What's the point?
Yeah.
But yeah, so we'll talk about that. But I definitely agree that like Daenerys doesn't have a lot of... We don't get a lot of her, like, backstory or anything about... Her internal monologue isn't available to us in the show, obviously.
Right,
and because she doesn't speak almost at all, there's not a real easy way to get around that.
Right.
Without projecting everything onto her. Mm-hmm. And that's just such a tricky place to be with a character like her who is just, as you said, just not a factor in her own story right now.
Yeah.
You know?
Like, yeah, that's the thing, too, right? Like, this is her POV. This is her telling us what this is like for her. Mm-hmm. And she has very little dialogue, if any, really. Like, there's, like yes and no's, you know? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And we're just in her head watching all this shit happen to and around her. Mm-hmm. And it is, it makes for a very frustrating chapter because as you're reading this, you kind of want to be like, hey, hold up. Yep. You know, somebody somewhere say something. And it doesn't come. It doesn't happen. There is no one to say anything. Yeah. And it's so clear. All right, let me ask you a question. For the show, Illyrio is the guy that was housing them on the show as well, right?
Correct.
And then we find out on the TV show much later, or a couple episodes later, that Viserys is behind Illyrio supporting them.
Yeah, I think so.
Right? Because he's, at the time anyway, he was, the Viserys character, not Viserys, Varys is all about, like, getting someone else onto the throne. And he's, like, you know, supporting her through all his back channels, right? Right. So we know that Illyrio has an agenda that is not 100% known to Viserys. And his agenda could just be payment. Like, I don't know if Illyrio is invested in them really taking the throne. Or if this is just, you know...
that's all assuming that how it goes in the book is how it was in the show also.
Exactly, right? Like, so I don't know if that's actually going to be the case. There's also a bit in this chapter with her, with Daenerys, remembering a house that she grew up in before, I guess, they were destitute. Mm-hmm. And they lived with someone, I forget who, but she talks about a red door. And there's a man who is like a protector. I don't remember his name. You know what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. The house with the red door is a representative of like this childhood that she wishes she got to have, that she just didn't.
And there's this man who was kind to her, who she describes as being like kind of like a big bear of a man, who always called her like princess or little lady or something. And then, but he was sick. And she knew he was sick. And then I guess after he dies, in the chapter it says that the few servants they had basically robbed them and then bounced. Yep. Which, Jesus.
Yeah, I mean, like, they've got no advocates at all, so what's to prevent them? Yeah. You know, in a world like this, allies are everything, I guess. So.
And, yeah, like, why wouldn't I rob somebody who can't do anything about it? Like, that's exactly who you want to rob.
Exactly.
You know? They teach you that in robbery school. But, yeah, so with that, also that sort of longing she has for this house with the red door just added another layer of sort of sadness to all this. And I think her chapter ends with, you know, her being, you know, oiled up and bathed and, you know, groomed to be presented to the cow. And she sees him and she's frightened. Yeah. Because that seems like a reasonable reaction to have. You know, she says that he's younger than she imagined, but he's like in his 20s, you know. I think. I might just be speculating.
I think they said, like, he was probably, like, mid-30s, but no older than that.
Oh, really? That old?
I think,
okay.
Yeah, something like that. Like, no older than 30. So I think that it was.
So, still, you know, significantly older than her. Of a race of people that I don't know if she's had any interaction with the Dothraki where she has been in hiding. Maybe she's seen them in passing. I don't know. But to see him for the first time, he's got to be unlike anyone she's ever seen or met before, as far as I'm thinking. And she is being handed over to him in exchange for an army.
Yep. Basically, she's just a dollar bill.
Yeah. And she's got this this shitty brother who we don't get a lot of detail, but I feel it's fair to say probably has been terrorizing her.
Yeah, that's the vibe.
For years. Because he is so power hungry. And right now, the only power he has over anyone is her. Of course he abuses it. Mm-hmm. Because that's what those kind of people do.
Yep.
So yeah, it just, I really was just like, the one chapter after I was done, I was just like, Jesus, this is a very different experience already.
Yeah, it's, I find it really interesting too, how much more relatable this backstory and really hearing it from her point of view makes Daenerys, because I don't think the show does a good job of making us really feel the circumstances that she's coming out of when she gets presented to the Cal. It's like, for us coming into this, we're seeing this as the big come up. But in the show, it's sort of treated as if she's been living this way with Illyrio in comfort and with moderate luxury. And there's like a mention of being called the Beggar King. There's a mention of having to like scrape by, but we don't ever really see it, and it doesn't seem to sink in your bones as a viewer that that's the situation.
It doesn't resonate because there's really not enough time given for it to. You know, on the show, these things are happening very quickly. You know, we meet them at Illyrio's house, which is like a nice, fine house because, you know, he's a merchant and a dabbler and all kinds of things, you know. So you're right. When we meet them on the show, it appears as though, you know, they've been doing just fine.
Yeah.
And you don't get... I think the show does a good job of impressing to us how important this is to Viserys. Right?
Okay.
But I don't think the show did a great job with letting us know where Daenerys was in all of this, you know. And again, you know, they have a huge story that they were trying to tell, and there's a lot to get to. So, I get the choices that were made, but it feels like you lose a little something. And also, you know, the Daenerys character for the run of the show, spoilers, is someone we see on the show anyway, becoming as obsessed with getting her throne back as her brother is here at the beginning. But at least in this chapter, for right now, she doesn't particularly care about any of that.
No, she really does not.
And I can't remember if I felt like she cared from the jump when I was watching the show or not. I can't remember. But I feel like it was presented in the show that this was as important to her as it was to her brother.
Yeah, I think that's part of what I meant when I said that it makes her more relatable, because there's just a certain, like, there's not to say that, like, as a kid, if you told me you could be a princess, don't you want to be a princess, that I wouldn't be like, fuck yeah, I want to be a princess.
Well, listen, who doesn't want to be a princess? Come on now, don't get crazy.
But it's more about the fact that she is so in the moment and just trying to make the best of a good situation that they've got right now after having so many bad situations. And there's a real feel to her of being worried that we finally are, like, sort of stable and being taken care of. And yeah, obviously that is coming with a price. We don't know what it is yet, but this guy clearly wants something. But can't we ride this out and just, like, enjoy this for a minute, because we just never have it? And the sense of, like, obviously Viserys, like you said, is so forward, because he is just not living in the real world. He's living in this like fantasy situation that he's got going on in his head, where people drink to his name by secret, and
right,
wives
and
still sew dragon banners and hide them.
There's a line too where Lyrio's like, well, this is what I hear they do.
Mm-hmm. Or so my spies tell me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
I love when Viserys says, and I'll go back and I will kill the Kingslayer. And he says that would be very fitting. And she can see him, like, laughing.
Mm-hmm. Like, this motherfucker doesn't have a chance against Jaime Lannister, first of all. Who are you kidding?
Right. Yeah, now that we know who Jaime Lannister is, it just makes so much sense why he would react to that in the way, like, and it's constantly mentioned when she's looking at him, how he, drew his sword, which he had never used in earnest.
Right. Right.
At one point,
it's a borrowed sword.
Exactly. His hand sat on the hilt of his borrowed sword. Just like all this shade over and over again. Yeah.
Yeah. It tells us that this dude is not about that life.
Yep.
And that he really is all talk. And the saddest part is that his little sister, who is dependent upon him for her survival, knows that he's full of shit. Mm-hmm. But, like, who can she tell? Who's she running to tell? You know? Yeah, so. That was that chapter.
Yep. And she tries to be like, I don't want to do this at one point. And he, like, loses his shit on her. Mm-hmm. And gets up in her face. And that was one line that made it into the show. I would let his entire Khalasar fuck you and their horses, too, if it meant that I would get my throne back.
Yep. And this is her protector.
Yep.
This is her guide to the world. This is the only thing that she has as far as family, or as close to she has as anyone giving a fuck about her. Mm-hmm. And this is the kind of fuck about her he gives.
Yep.
And it's just disgusting. And it was good to be reminded how much I dislike this character.
And I feel like he was cast really well.
Yeah, he was.
When I saw him on screen, I was just like, oh, shit, that's Viserys. Like, he just felt right immediately. Yep. That show really did do amazing with casting.
It did. So that chapter ends with her seeing the cow, but we don't get the actual, like,
meeting,
introductions and meetings and stuff yet, right?
Right.
Okay.
And then we go to Eddard.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of casting, Sean Bean. What do you think?
As casting? Mm-hmm. I think it's pretty good.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, I think it's pretty good, pretty fucking good. Now, this was a chapter that felt like the show managed to capture a bit.
Okay.
There was a line, and I don't think it was in the show, but I don't think it was in the book. Like, so when they go down to the crypts, all right, so the caravan shows up. Everybody's there. It's a who's who. It's a very nice procession into Winterfell. They have, the king is riding in with his knights on each side. They have the girls, Sansa and Arya, are escorting Tommen and Joffrey in. Mm-hmm. I think Robb may have Marcella, like, up on his shoulders or something.
Is that right? Okay. I didn't remember that part. I'm trying to get to...
One of the brothers has her up in their arms, and I figure it's got to be him, because Jon is not in the procession. Theon rides in, I believe, behind Jon and Ned. So I think it is Robb who has her.
Okay.
But, and it's all very fancy and what you would expect. And then Ned Stark is immediately like, holy shit, is that Robb? Because, ooh.
Yeah.
He is described, when he was at war as being like, just a man of so much muscle that all the women swoon. And now he is, overweight, bloated, drunk practically. He's just not in good health, not at his peak.
Yeah, he's definitely got a vibe of somebody who's, like, aware of that and does not give a shit.
Yeah. So there's a bit where Ned is watching, and he says he doesn't recognize him until Robert dismounts, and it's a familiar move, even though it's not as graceful as it used to be. And Robert wants to go immediately to the crypts to see Lyanna. Mm-hmm. And we get a little bit of a pushback from Cersei. She's trying to be like, we're tired. Mm-hmm. Maybe we should freshen up. Even though she don't give a fuck about freshening up. No. She just doesn't want, the disrespect of him running to see his ex-lover, Mm-hmm. But Jaime comes and kind of calms her and quiets her off to the side. And Robert and Ned go down to the crypts. Now, in the show, I could have sworn there's a moment where Robert admits that he has a hard time even picturing her face anymore.
I think that's true,
but that doesn't seem to have in the book. He is like lovingly caressing her. I don't know, her bust, her statue, her, what do you call that? It's a specific word for it when you're dead.
I don't remember.
But her likeness, right?
Right.
He is rubbing her cheek, mm-hmm. And there's nothing about how he can't remember what she looks like.
Yeah, I'm wondering about that now that you say it. Like, because that rings a bell, but I can't tell if that's him or, yeah, I don't know. Yeah. If anybody can specifically remember, please let me know.
Because there's a whole conversation in the show, I think, about when they're talking about why they went to war and all this other kind of stuff. And if I remember correctly, the tone of it is almost like, was it even worth it?
Yeah.
But this scene in the crypts between the two of them is, I think that this line made it to the show too, where Robert says that he kills Rhaegar,
yes.
Kills him every night 1,000 times in his dreams.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, I don't know, like this moment with them. Poor Robert, he's all huffing and puffing. That's how I would be if I tried to go down to the Cribshaw. Listen.
He's just so, like, there's a feeling almost of, like, when she went out of his life, he just sort of, like, stopped giving a shit.
It feels very much like that to me. Yeah. Like, once the war was won in her name, that was it. He didn't have, like, a purpose, really. I think, like, from what I know from the show, we'll see how it goes in the books, he really was never that interested in being king.
Mm-hmm.
He was fighting a war to avenge the murder of the woman he loved.
Mm-hmm.
And then also, like, Ned's parents and some other shit that had happened. But for the most part.
Right, yeah.
And the way he's written here, it feels like this is a man that is a little bit lost.
Mm-hmm.
And has lost his way and fills that loss with, mead and whores and whatever, and not taking anything seriously.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Again, as opposed to the characterization on the show, which to me felt a lot more like, oh, I just don't care. I've got my shit and I'm comfortable. Why shouldn't I live it up? Live it up to the, the hilt. And then they talk about, Ned asked him about Jon Arryn. And they have a really sweet moment, I thought. Because Robert just says, I love that man.
Mm-hmm.
Which I'm always going to be a fan of when men admit that they love another man, especially. Like, they can just say the words.
Agreed.
I loved him.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's some talk about fucking Lysa and Robin.
Yeah, when you know what that's about, it changes the circumstances in your brain a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit. Because as I'm listening, you're just like, well, she has fled. Okay, so there's a couple things happening here. Robert had asked Tywin to ward Robin.
Right.
Right? And,
to which Eddard is like, you... Ooh,
right.
Okay, but...
Yeah, he's just like, what does he say to himself? I'd rather, like, a nest of vipers raise him than Tywin.
Yes.
Which I feel like is fucking fair.
Yep.
But, so, Lysa has just absconded in the middle of the night. She didn't even say goodbye, which is kind of rude.
Right.
But also kind of smart because, you know, even though it's not known yet, right? Mm-hmm. But I can't remember from the show or not, but in the book, we don't know what has happened to Jon Arryn yet. But Lysa leaving in the middle of the night tells me she does not feel safe.
Right.
Right. That's what I take away from that little bit of information. Mm-hmm. And Robert is all salty, talking about what makes me look bad to Tywin. It's rude. What?
I love that so much. And Ned is like, well, I mean, I can, foster the kid as a ward if you need it. And he's like, well, I don't want to offend Tywin. Right. And he's like, fuck Tywin. Jesus Christ,
yeah, like, dude. When did we start giving a fuck? But, you know, that turns out, you know, from the show, I know what's going on behind that as well, with the money and everything. But at the moment, not only is Ned Stark just a better fucking pick, but it's family. You know, his wife, sister, son. Like how would you ask anyone else to foster him? It makes, you know. So I was listening to this, and I don't know if that made it to the show or if I just forgot about it. But this whole bit about sending him to live with Tywin, I was listening to the chapter like, oh, no. Let us not do that.
Oh, God, yeah. Even though, like, that kid sucks. And I'm just kind of like, you know, send him wherever. Fuck him.
I'm hoping that he doesn't suck in the books.
It's all open.
Oh, good Lord. Because he was terrible on the show. There's also a bit in the beginning of the chapter when the procession is coming into Winterfell. There's a conversation about everyone's looks
yes.
and how fair everyone's hair is. Everybody's got golden blonde hair, you know, Jaime, Cersei, all three kids, and it's just there, you know. There's not a lot made of it, but it's just there.
Yep.
And I'm like, okay, book, I see you in chapter 4. Okay.
Just dropping a little hint here and there. I do love to, like, I know that we talked about it already, just the way in which he thinks about what Robert used to be like, and he really sounds like he was just, there's a very King Henry VIII feel to him, you know?
Yeah.
Because King Henry VIII, for those of you who aren't aware, was, like, very unusually tall for the era, and also unusually attractive. He was, like, very, like, sort of ruddy, good looks, and very powerfully built.
Yep, you don't get a lot of that with a lot of inbreeding, so he was, you know...
Right?
He was a specimen.
And as he got older and just began to take his life in his hands here and there with the way that he was living, he began to sort of literally, like, decay. Like, he got an injury to his leg that never fully healed. And just festered for the rest of his life, and apparently stank really bad. And I saw something, I think Kinea posted it, about how one of his wives, she's like, I think that they used a jar on him, did some sort of hex, because he just could not, like, father a child. He kept, like, running into problems with every woman he was with after. I think she said that she thinks that it was Catherine of Aragon.
I think it would be Catherine, too.
Yeah.
If anybody was going to do it, it would be Catherine.
And I was like, you know, that's as good an explanation as any, because he had everything at his fingertips, and he just completely decayed.
He just, like... I love that you're saying decayed, because that feels so right. Like, he just started, like atrophy set in, you know? And his power hadn't waned. You know, he was still king. He still had access to his, you know, his guards and his army and his advisors and his money. But it didn't matter, because his physical was just falling apart.
Yep.
And the more he tried to force his will into the universe by, what I mean by that is like trying to have a male heir, you know, despite it failing several times. It was like the universe was like, yeah, it's going to cost you. Mm-hmm. Might cost you a big toe. I don't know. You keep fucking, you know. And yeah, I think Robert has a lot of that, you know, going on.
Especially, like, you know, the heirs not even being his. There was a lot of theorizing that King Henry was, like, barren. You know, a lot of people think that the reason that none of these women could conceive was either he was born barren or he contracted some sort of STD.
He probably had syphilis.
Right.
That'll lend itself to the fucking rot.
So, yeah, I think that that there's some of that here as well, with the fact that, like, all of these kids are not even his, and King Henry had one male heir that I think died fairly young, and he had one that was a bastard that he was very, very proud of, who most people seem to think was genuinely his kid because he looked so much like him.
I did not know that.
Yeah. I think they called him Robert Fitzroy, something like that. And the woman who bore the kid that looked like him was a prostitute. And I'm just like, yeah, well, that's the last, like, healthy child you had. She gave you something, dude. You know?
Probably.
That's her. That was her job, is to just, you know, screw around. So she probably was... Nobody had any knowledge of venereal diseases that was any good, so
there's no
why not?
fucking penicillin floating around.
Yeah.
I did not know that he had a male out of a bastard. I didn't know that about King Henry. Huh, interesting. So, yeah, I mean, good lord, think of the tie-in to that, you know?
Right.
With fucking Gendry. I almost called him Gendry.
Don't you do this to me again.
Why would I do that? So, once we start talking about Jon Arryn, we get, like, the bomb dropped. Mm-hmm. Why all of this, you know, pomp and circumstance is happening all the way to fuck up in the north, which Robert is not a fan of, BT dubs.
Yes.
He could not believe that people would choose to live in such a place, you know, which is how I feel whenever I go to Florida. It's like, it's fine for visiting, but why are we getting our mail here?
I love the idea that as much as he and Cersei do not get along, she also does not like it in the north. They can at least agree on that much.
Right.
Both just like,
if he would give
this
her
place.
If he would give her the time of day, they could agree on it, but he's straight ignoring her pretty much throughout these chapters. And so he tells Ned that he wants him to come be the hand of the king. Bum, bum, bum. And he is, you know, laying it on pretty thick.
Yeah, he is.
I need some friends around me. You know, there's a bunch of treacherous snakes down in King's Landing. I need somebody I can trust.
I love his whole, like, you should definitely come and do this job. It sucks. I hate it. I hate all the people. I hate every part of the job. All of his blows. Will you please come and do it?
But the weather's great and the wine is really sweet, I believe, are the two selling points. Oh, and the women. You can't get over the women. They walk around practically naked, according to Rob.
Yep.
Because, you know, what does he say? Either when they're in silk or in cotton, it doesn't matter because it gets so hot, they start to sweat and the clothes cling to them, which is what you want in a king, you know.
Oh, God.
And, he tells Ned that he can sleep on it, but it's clear this is not up for debate.
Yeah,
this is being presented like a friendly offer, but I feel like it's very clear that if Robert has to order him to do so, he absolutely will, and it feels like Ned doesn't want it to be an order because then that's going to make the friendship awkward. So it's like this unstated kind of, don't make me make you do this.
Right.
because then it'll be all weird between us. So just fucking do it, because you know you have to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what is it that he says, don't you know the saying? And Ned's like, oh yeah, you mean the king dreams and the hand builds? And Robert's like, not exactly the one I was thinking of. The king eats and the hand takes the shit is the one that I am
oh my
more.
God.
I think that one holds the most veracity.
Jesus Christ.
Which,
yeah. Way to sell it, you know?
I will say, at the very least, he doesn't lie.
That's true.
He doesn't try and be like, I think you'll, really enjoy it. The people are great. He doesn't try and he's just like, oh no, it sucks. And I hate it.
Yeah.
Help.
and yeah, help. Basically, come and experience this sucky thing with me, because we're bros.
Yep.
And I think that chapter ends with them heading back out of the crypts to join everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
And then we go to the Jon chapter, which is the big welcome feast.
Yeah.
And, well. It is a welcome. It is a feast. It is also a chance. I cannot get over fucking Jon Snow and how he is catching everything.
Mm-hmm.
And coming off of the Daenerys chapter where she does the same thing, I'm just like, oh shit.
Yeah.
Hold up. Wait a minute. Feeling like they had something in common that I felt like did not make it into the show at all.
Mm-hmm.
But we're only the first 4 chapters in, 5 maybe, counting the prologue. And already I'm just like, look at these motherfuckers paying attention to what's going on when literally no one else is doing that.
Yeah, and it's really interesting how much they have in common for the reason why. Daenerys is not the focal point because she's not the one whose throne so far is at stake, and so nobody really cares about her. And that's sort of similar to Jon's situation. He's a bastard. And it says I think one of the lines is you had to learn to notice things when you were a bastard.
Yes, yep.
And that's something that is talked about a lot in abuse victims and people who have trauma in their past, is that they become very sensitive to changes in mood, and just basically it's a defense mechanism.
Yeah, you become hypervigilant to protect yourself. So Jon is watching, the feast, and he's noticing that Ned looks completely preoccupied and got 1,000-yard stare. He's just not really connecting with anyone. He's participating in a very sort of rote way.
Right.
He's raising his glass for the toast, and he's here, King Robert, when it's necessary, but he's not really engaged with anyone. He notices that Robert is well past being drunk, and is just laughing too loud and talking too much and just kind of being, a sloppy drunk.
He's laughing too loud, talking too much, being too much.
Being too much. He notices that Cersei is still mad and is just ice cold stare. And I think where Jon is sitting, because he's not with the family proper because he's a bastard, his uncle Benjen is near him.
Yes.
Benjen. And he notices Jon noticing. He's like one of the only ones. And he is impressed with how much Jon has been able to, figure out and pick up on. And then I have forgotten, I don't know if this is in the show or not, or I just forgot, Jon wants and asked to go to Castle Black.
I think that is in the show, yeah.
It probably is. I just can't remember. But, because I remember the uncle coming, and I kind of vaguely remember this scene, but I don't remember the details. But he is desperate to go.
Yeah, he doesn't have anything here. There's no reason for him to stay here.
And in my memory, which is wrong, my recollection was he ended up at the wall, because he didn't have any other options. But also that, not that he got sent as punishment, but that it was brought to him like, well, you gotta do something. What about going to the wall?
Right.
But here, he's very... Also, Jon is fucking 14.
Yeah.
Y'all... I wish you could see my face right now. This motherfucker is 14.
He a baby.
A baby. And his Uncle Benjen is just like, well, first of all, you 14. Mm-hmm. You may not have heard Rashawn just say it, but she just said it. You're 14.
He's like, yeah, like I said, I'm nearly 15 years old. I'm like, dude, no.
And Jon is saying, I know that my father will approve it if you, vouch for me. Mm-hmm. And I cannot remember how that works. I mean, I know he ends up at the wall, but I can't remember the details of how that works out. I cannot remember if Ned, took convincing or he was on board right away. So I'm looking forward to reading that to see how that plays out, because I can't remember. But then they start talking about Jon's prospects, and he's talking about how good he is at this thing. He compares himself to Robb. I think he says Robb is better at lancing, but he is a better rider, maybe?
Swordsman.
Better swordsman? Mm-hmm. Oh, I thought he said horseman. Swordsman, that makes sense. Okay. And Jon is also drinking a bit.
He is getting lit. He is just like, fuck all y'all.
And at first, his uncle was like, oh, you kind of handling your liquor there. Okay. Mm-hmm. But he keeps drinking.
Yeah. He's got to push it. I like this. Especially, this is part of, I'm sure, his uncle being like, all right, you know what? How about we sleep on it? See how you feel about this in the morning.
Right.
You might wake up and be like, what the fuck did I say I wanted to do? Oh, my God. So I guess we'll see.
And isn't there, they say something that makes him almost cry, but I can't remember what it is, and he goes running out. Ghost is also there under the table, and they have a conversation about Ghost being there, and there's a bit of a moment between Ghost and one of the, regular hounds over some food. But somebody says something.
Oh, he says, have a couple of bastards of your own before you make this oath, because you don't know what you're giving up before you do. And Jon's like, fuck that. Yeah.
He's like, I would never, ever fucking have a bastard. And he means that shit in his little 14-year-old heart.
Yep.
And it's so upsetting for him. And I think that's when he leaves, right? Mm-hmm. Which, and he
gets up to leave and trips and knocks wine over. It's just so embarrassing.
It is not a graceful exit.
No.
And you know what? This is a funny thing. So, I won't generalize. I won't go into a whole long thing about men TM. We'll just keep it to the characters here. But, so his uncle shows, in my opinion, one of two things. Either a complete lack of sensitivity to Jon's status as a bastard, mm-hmm. It's just a big joke, or there is some sort of conventional way of thinking about being a bastard in this world, that once you're an adult, it's not supposed to matter as much to you anymore. Right? I'm not sure which it is. But for his uncle to say that to Jon, I feel like, how could you not know how upsetting that would be to him? And his uncle, who, from what I remember from the TV show and the regard in which Jon holds him, it seems out of character for him to just be cruel for the sake of cruelty.
I think he's just being thoughtless.
Right? So, I don't, like, maybe he forgot for a second, like, because he doesn't think of Jon as being a bastard. He thinks of Jon as being his nephew. And so maybe he just spoke out of turn that way. I'm not sure.
This is something that I'm going to bring out a little bit of the conversation that Rashawn and I were having on Sober about Pawn Stars.
Oh my God.
One of the notable things, those of you who have seen Pawn Stars, is how many of the jokes and themes of that show are, I hate my kid. I hate my dad. Mm-hmm, my kid's a failure. My dad doesn't love me. Mm-hmm. And nobody believes in me. And there is a part of me that's like, does he just think that this is not even cruel? He thinks it's a joke that Jon can take. He overestimated how disconnected from this Jon is.
Right.
And really thought it was funny because he just doesn't get it. Really doesn't like, and maybe Jon's good at hiding it usually because he like runs out of there with tears in his eyes. But there's a sense that he is usually not this emotional about it.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So it might just be that it's closer to the surface tonight than it usually is, and Benjen's just not really aware of it.
That's probably the most likely thing, because again, I don't think that Benjen is supposed to be a cruel uncle. Mm-hmm. And we know that in the brief descriptions we've had of Jon so far, they've all been about how kind of like stoic he is, you know? Mm-hmm. So maybe this just was a kind of putting your foot in your mouth situation, and you know, you didn't mean to hurt his feelings to that extent. But Jon is you know, beside himself. He's all up in his feelings.
Yeah, he really is.
And he goes outside, and Tyrion is out there.
Yeah. What did you think of this?
You know, this description of him, and there's a bit of a description of him when they're walking first into Winterfell, but, you know, we get a little bit more here. And he is written to be, like, low-key repulsive.
Yep.
Like, I mean, you know, there's nothing about him physically that, you know, is supposed to make us think that he is attractive, and it, you know, for a little person, you know, mm-hmm. He is just unattractive. Like, he's written almost like monstrously, which I was sort of, you know, taken aback from, because, you know, obviously that's not our experience of him on the show, you know.
Right.
Peter Dinklage is a handsome devil.
Yeah, he's a good-looking man, definitely.
You know. So, even with that whack-ass scar they gave him.
Oh, my God,
yeah. So I was just like, oh, yikes.
Mm-hmm. And he does this fucking somersault.
Listen, I don't remember. Yeah, this little.
So this is something that
I didn't know what to do with that. I didn't like it.
George R. R. Martin has come out and said that if he could redo anything, he would take out these little bits of like tumbling that he has Tyrion do.
Oh, yeah, I didn't like it.
Yeah, because he says that the thought he had was that Tyrion tried to like really lean in on the sort of like carnival aspect of things just to kind of like fuck with everybody. Mm-hmm. But that he like came to learn afterwards that there is a lot of like joint pain and just like hindrance of movement with the mm-hmm. condition, mm-hmm. and that it's just not something that would have been likely at all.
Just tumbling around for no fucking reason.
Yeah. So he had an idea of what he was doing there, and he found out later that it just was kind of out of the question, but it was already out there. So
yeah, I didn't love it because it felt, you know, very circusy.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
And I was just like, why would he? I mean, I get that Tyrion is painfully aware of his status, right? Mm-hmm. But he is still, you know, from a noble house, you know, of high birth. And why is he fucking somersaulting all over the place? Like, you know, like, he still has an idea of his place in this world, and that just feels unnecessarily undignified.
Yeah.
And I just, I didn't love it. But we do get that wonderful conversation.
Yeah, I just really like this connection that they get to have here.
Yeah, I did too. And a lot of this dialogue is right in the show. You know, they just scooped it right up, which they were right to do so, because it's pretty good.
Yeah.
But this advice that Tyrion gives him, which is really, y'all, it's advice for all of us. You know, it really is. It's so hokey, and it's the kind of thing they tell you when you're in the 4th grade, but this shit checks out.
Yep.
You know, and if you embrace the thing about yourself that people are going to weaponize against you, then they can't use it to hurt you.
It's a real 8 Mile moment.
You know, it really is. And, you know, it might not be the only lesson as far as coping skills you need to manage life, you know, as successfully and as well adjusted as you can. Mm-hmm. But it's a tool you can throw in that box.
Yep, definitely. Definitely.
Especially when you're younger, you know, just so that you can get through it, so that you can begin, you can begin the real work of working on yourself. But you got to survive it first to get to the point where you're going to try to work on it.
Yeah, you said something about how, like, this is, like, you know, advice from 4th grade, and I was just like, man, life does not change all that much in terms of, like, coping from grade school and middle school.
It really doesn't, you know? I mean, how many times a day I have to look at some bullshit comment someone made and just be like, I'm rubber and you're glue. Mm-hmm. Because otherwise I'll just be in that comment thread till I die. You know, it's like, you know, we'll go into a thread, say what I have to say, and then turn off notifications on that bitch. Mm-hmm.
Or keep notifications on and just laugh react every single thing the person says without responding at all, which is one of my favorite tactics.
I keep forgetting to do that. I have to make sure I start doing that more often. But, yeah, I need to make a note.
It's just such a nice passive aggressive, like with people who are just, I'm just trying to have an argument, a real conversation. No, you're not.
No, you're not.
I'm going to not give you any of the thing that you claim to want. Enjoy. You suck.
I like that we said no, you're not in stereo. So, they talk. Does Jon tell him about wanting to go to the wall at this point?
Yeah, I think that's like, well, it's before that, because that was what caused Benjen to tell him have some bastards.
I mean telling Tyrion that he wants to go to the wall.
Oh,
does that happen here?
I don't think that comes up here. No.
Okay.
They're just talking about the in general, because he tries to be like, I'm basically a bastard to my dad, and Jon's like, you know what? Fuck you.
Yeah.
No, you are true named and yada yada yada. Mm-hmm. And Tyrion's like, look, I get why he would think that. But you go tell my dad and see how he reacts. And I think you'll be surprised at how uninterested he is in claiming me.
What does he say? All dwarfs are bastards in their father's eyes.
Yep.
And it is a really poignant moment, you know, where you're talking about carrying the weight, you know, the full knowledge. Because Tywin is not even trying to pretend. Right?
No.
So, carrying the weight of your father's disgust in you, your whole life, you know, is, I feel like being a bastard might be actually a notch above that.
Right?
You know? Because, I guess it just really depends on whose bastard you are, you know. Mm-hmm. For Jon, he does not have a father who is disproving, you know, and disgusted by his mere existence.
Right.
You know? he doesn't have a father at all, as far as, really. But so in that lack is not inconsequential, not having a father, but it is also not the same as having a father who actively hates you.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
I agree. I mean, with Jon, it's like he isn't a Stark officially, but it's clear that Eddard has tried to make him as much a part of the family as possible, despite having a very good excuse to exclude him if he wanted to do that. And with Tyrion, it's the opposite. His father grudgingly includes him because he is required to, and that's what.
Yeah, exactly. Because like the social mores say you have to.
Yep.
If Tywin could have gotten away with just killing his kid years ago, he probably would have. The only reason he didn't is I think Tywin probably thinks that would be like, that would debase him. I'm too good for that. I'm too good of a father to kill my son, even though I really, really wish I could.
Oh my God.
And I'll try again later.
There's a John Mulaney bit where he's talking about how ridiculous the story of Solomon is, with the baby that gets cut.
Oh,
somebody's talking about cutting in half. And he's like, just how ridiculous is it that somebody's like, hey, no, don't cut the baby in half. And their response is, you must be the father. And Tywin Lannister maybe couldn't even quite get it up to say, no, don't cut the baby in half.
He would be like, in the other room, barely raising his voice. Hey, no, don't
stop.
Do that.
Don't come back.
Please, no. And then, with a shrug, well, what are you going to do?
Oh, what a shame. Somebody really should have stepped in. Anyway, what's for dinner?
So I, listening to this bit, I felt a sympathy for Tyrion, who I've just met in the book. And it's funny too because there's enough written and said about the Lannisters in these first few chapters. Between what we get in the Daenerys chapter, we hear Jaime referred to as Kingslayer in that chapter. What else did we hear? The way they come in, it's negative, but it's not.
I have no idea what you're getting at, so I'm sorry if I'm not helping.
It is the kind of thing where you can. It's like low key shade, You get the sense already very early on that the Lannisters, not great people,
right?
Even though we don't have much backstory yet, the tone in which they are each discussed when they are discussed, it's just got a little bit of side eye to it, So I'm meeting Tyrion for the first time in this moment with Jon, and I'm already have been set up a little bit, subconsciously to be like, them Lannisters, they ain't shit.
Yep, definitely.
I don't know 100% why yet, but I get it. And then all of a sudden, you're completely sympathetic to Tyrion.
Yeah.
And you're just, and in my brain, I'm already trying to be like, oh, well, maybe he's different. Maybe he really is different from the rest of them. We will see.
Dun dun dun.
But yeah, it was a pretty quick turnaround, and I guess it's to be expected because what Tyrion is saying about himself and his relationship to his family and his father specifically is pretty dark.
Yeah, it is.
So it's easy to come out on the side of being like, "Oh, your family's awful. I am so sorry."
It's honestly because it is dark, but it's also just so exactly what so many people would expect also in this era. And whenever I say in this era, y'all know what I mean, even though this isn't real. But just the expectation of what a man would want his son to be versus what Tyrion is. What especially someone like Tywin would want his son to be, which is basically what every father would want, but on steroids, because he has these like expectations that are insane.
Yeah.
And
we don't even know all that much about them yet.
Right.
But it is just, I feel like the groundwork has been laid to what we can expect from the Lannisters.
Mm-hmm.
In these quick, short opening paragraph, chapters. I'm trying to think. In the show, this conversation also turns into Tyrion talking about like how much he likes to read and how like kind of how smart he is, and all that. But I feel like we don't really get that here.
No, we don't. And I don't actually think that happens quite here in the show, but maybe it is. No. I know that there's some of that conversation with somebody else on the show as well, so I might be conflating those things.
Yeah, I feel like on the show, when Jon catches him outside, he's like reading.
How about that?
And Tyrion is like sitting on the wall reading. Like some old book he found in, somewhere in the libraries of Winterfell or whatever. He's reading about the Starks of the past or something.
So they just decided to speed that shit up. The show does that. They try and shorten character development stuff by showing. Because they can't have the internal monologue, so what can they do?
Right. So, my goodness. How does this one end?
I feel like it's Tyrion walking away and whistling a jaunty tune. Let me just double check here. Here it is. He walked away, whistling a tune, and when he opened the door, the light from within threw his shadow clear across the yard, and for just a moment, Tyrion Lannister stood tall as a king.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm going to have to get the paperback for this, because one of the things that I'm running into is when I listen to the audio, they just sort of like a wisp.
They what?
Like the end of the chapter is like fine gossamer. And it
What you're saying is you have a bad memory.
Well, we talked before about, we already know that. But my, what do you call it? My auditory comprehension is not as grand as my reading comprehension.
Yeah, you said this last week. Why didn't you get it?
Oh, I didn't hit the checkout button. Ma'am, if you have to be all in my business, I thought I ordered it, but turns out that shit is still in my cart.
Oh, so you want like a physical? I'm thinking the Kindle version, because that's what I always use.
You know what? I might just get the Kindle version too. I might do that instead. But I do like having a book in my hand. I do.
It's so funny because I know so many people feel that way, and I just #can't relate. Like, I don't like dealing with a paper book. I don't like worrying about
where it is.
Things getting, like, you'd think that, you still have to worry about electronics getting wet. Nah, not really. Not that kind of thing. Like, I can wipe it off.
Right.
But if I leave my sweating cup of iced tea next to my book in Texas, that turns into like a 5-inch square puddle that I didn't mean to leave my book in the middle of, and now the back cover is just a soggy mess that peels right off. I am speaking from experience, if you can't tell. So, yeah, for me, I'm just like, I'm off the paper books, kids. I don't do them anymore.
Yeah, I think I'm going to get myself the paper book, because I just, I like to be able to flip my pages, find what I'm talking about. I like to be able to bang it against my leg for emphasis if I'm making a very important point.
I like to be able to bang it against my leg.
No, ma'am.
All right. Sure. Chuck Tingle over here.
Oh, my God.
Banged in the butt by a book. And also, like, it's really nice to have the whisper sync on the audiobook. If you got it through Audible,
I did.
You can just open the book on your Kindle and it'll open to the page that you were listening to on Audible automatically. Which is really
fun.
Nice. And that comes in super handy for me with what I do.
Yeah, I bet it does.
And I also just don't have all the room in my fucking office. Like,
listen,
I'm covering at this moment in time 9 separate books.
I don't have any room for nary another book.
And
Not
yet,
nary another book. And I'm about to order one anyway. This is a conversation me and Steve have all the time because he orders books like nobody's business. Always got books coming in the mail.
He's an author, so he has some excuse there. That's one of those things where it's like, I don't know. I get it.
He's just reading on this for his own enjoyment.
But that's what I mean. Like, for an author, you can be like, oh, it's research. It's to improve my own craft. To edify my work as well as, whatever. Fucking.
All right.
I like when I try and, do a hot air bluster and I run out of steam. I'm just like, how do people do this all the time?
We're all out of steam. I was proud of you for just starting.
That's what I'm going to tell myself next time I quit something. Rashawn would be proud that I even started.
Listen, I am here for those false starts, y'all. You just got to fucking like a vending machine. You just got to keep rocking that shit a couple times before it gets over.
It's so true.
Mm-hmm. Well, okay.
All right, everybody. Well, thank you all so much for listening. I hope that you are enjoying the show. This, I have decided, is going to start coming out on Monday mornings. The very first episode I posted on a Tuesday. So some of you will be expecting that to be the day. But that's just because I was late. Because my computer's been acting up and couldn't connect to the internet yesterday. And from now on, they should be going up on Monday mornings at 6:30 Central Time is when I have it scheduled for. So
woohoo.
Keep an eye out for that. And of course, if you're a patron, you get it early. So it should be probably if you're a patron, you'll get it on Friday. Don't hold me to that.
Yeah.
And otherwise, I'm trying to think if I have any other announcements. I don't think so. But if you're interested in becoming a patron and getting in on the Mighty Network group where we have a Song of Ice and Fire spoiler chat. It's a group where you can talk about all of the stuff that Rashawn doesn't know because it's not in the show or we haven't gotten there in the books. It's really fun. There's a lot of stuff that many of us are extremely excited for her to get to or worried about or just curious what she's going to think because we're not even quite sure what we think. And I think it's a fun area to chat about this stuff. So if you want access to that, you have to become a patron. Patreon.com/unspoiled. And you can email me at unspoiledpodcast@gmail.com if you want to let me know about a thing that I messed up, which I'm sure I did. Or you can tweet at me at Unspoiled Show. I also have a Facebook, which I'll pretend from now on that I don't have because it's useless. So don't do that because I probably won't see it. It's just, they suck. They've banned me. Everything is just don't do it. So email, Twitter, or even on Instagram is probably more reliable. At Unspoiled Podcast. All right, guys. Thank you again so much for listening. I hope that you have enjoyed the coverage, and we will be seeing you with 3 new chapters next week. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
Bye, guys.
Joffrey, Cersei, Walder Frey, Meryn Trant, Tywin Lannister.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.